All right. Welcome back to another edition of News Project Live on GNAT-TV's Facebook page. I'm Andrew McKeever, the news director at GNAT-TV's News Project, and it's a pleasure to have you with us today on Friday, April 15th. Hope you all got your taxes filed or whatever, or got those extensions in. This is the big day for the IRS anyway. Well, let's get right to it and sort of run down a few of the local and statewide stories that we've been following. We'll start off kind of on a statewide note this week, and just wanted to note that the Vermont political season saw an important early event this past Wednesday with a four-way debate between four of the leading candidates for Vermont's open congressional seat. It was a debate hosted by VT Digger, the news website. Featured Senator Becca Balint, Lieutenant Governor Molly Gray, Senator Keisha Ram Hinsdale, and political newcomer CNA Chase Clifford, who took questions from some of the reporters at VT Digger and questions that were sent in by readers, and then they got to ask each other questions, which I thought was kind of an interesting way to go. So they covered topics ranging from the war in Ukraine to campaign finance and voting, paid family leave, political contributions, a range of other issues, as they each sort of pressed their claim to be the best candidate to win in the November general election and take the place of incumbent Peter Welch, who is running for the U.S. Senate and hoping to replace retiring Senator Patrick Leahy. We've heard a lot. We've heard about Becca Balint and Molly Gray and Keisha Ram Hinsdale. Fewer of you probably have heard of CNA Chase Clifford. She was a former aide to U.S. Representative Ayanna Pressley from Massachusetts, who represents a district near the Boston area. And she announced about a month ago that she was jumping into the race for Vermont's sole congressional seat. And hoping to win the votes of progressive Democrats. She certainly tried to occupy the progressive lane in that debate. So she's from Essex. She graduated from high school there in 2013, went on to Boston College, worked for a while for former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick, as well as Julian Castro when he was the head of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and then went on to work for Representative Pressley. So anyway, we'll hopefully hear more from her as we go along. There's another candidate as well who's in the running, probably even few of you have heard of, and that's Dr. Lewis Myers, who's a hospital physician at the Rutland Regional Medical Center. He's also running for Congress in the Democratic primary. He only announced about 10 days ago. He's not, technically speaking, a political newcomer. He ran for the state Senate in Chittenden County twice, in 2018 and 2020. And earlier today, we set up a Zoom call with him, and so we'll be taping an interview with him next Wednesday. And like I said, we hope to have conversations with all the major candidates in both parties who are running in the August primary, not only for the congressional seat but also for the Senate seat. So we'll see how that goes as we go along. Meanwhile, on Tuesday, the governor had his traditional or typical or weekly press conference. They now range rather widely around to a lot of topics. They no longer are strictly about the COVID status. From week to week, and a lot of the discussion was about wrapping up legislative business with the legislature as it begins to look close to the end of its session. Probably will be ending sometime around the middle of May or the second half of May. And some of the major bills, of course, are coming down to the finish line, and the legislature and the governor's office are trying to iron out some of their differences of them. There's still a lot of discussion around some major bills involving housing and Act 250, and also the climate council's the legislation that followed their report that came in last December. That's the one that involves that clean heat standard you've probably heard a lot about. And by the way, you can also watch a program we did last week about that, where we had a conversation with Representative Laura Sibilia, who is on the House Committee for Technology and Energy, and also with Matt Cota, who is the executive director of the Vermont Fuel Dealers Association. So we had a really interesting conversation with them, and you can go there to learn a lot more about the clean heat standard if you'd like to. There is also, like I said, a lot of other bills, including the state budget. So there was conversation about that, and the governor hoping to, draw the legislature closer to his views on some of those, and we'll see how that goes. But I thought one of the more interesting moments of the press conference came when Dr. Mark Levine talked about and this is a sad piece of news, a record number of opioid related overdose deaths that were reported in 2021. Opioid addiction and deaths spiked across the country during the pandemic, and that did not spare Vermont. In 2021, we lost 210 Vermonters from opioid overdose deaths, and that's the highest number of fatal opioid overdoses the state has ever recorded since records have been kept. They jumped by 1/3 compared to the year before in 2020. And Rutland County had the highest fatality rates, but were followed closely by Windham and Bennington counties. And so the governor is also calling for $8 million in new spending on prevention programs aimed at addressing substance use disorders. The report that was released this week found that the fentanyl was involved in 93 of last year's opioid deaths, while the percentage of deaths that involved heroin dropped from 25% in 2020 to 10% last year. Cocaine was involved in 48 of all opioid-related overdose deaths, according to that report. That 2021 figure of 210 was up from 158 in 2020, and just by way of comparison, back in 2010, there were 37, which of course is 37 too many, but quite kind of puts it in perspective just how worse that whole situation has become. And Dr. Levine noted that isolation and stigma around the disease of addiction were big factors in keeping those who need help from seeking it. And one further program note, we're hoping to have Dr. Levine on one of our discussion shows next week, along with a local doctor and a local school nurse who will be discussing lessons learned from the pandemic from a public health standpoint. We're going to be taping that next Thursday, and you'll be able to see it sometime shortly after that, the following week. So turning to our COVID numbers, today the state health department is reporting they saw 263 new cases reported, 32 Vermonters in the hospital, 6 of them in an ICU. In Bennington County, there were 12 new cases, 12 out of those 263, 73 over the past 2 weeks. In Rutland County, 5 new cases, 192 over the past 2 weeks. In Windham County, 8 new cases, 98 over the past 2 weeks. That compares to the report that came in on yesterday, which reported 327 new cases, 35 folks in the hospital, and 7 in the ICU. There were no new deaths reported, thankfully, between yesterday and today. Just one other note: it's been noted that the fact that a lot of folks are now using home antigen tests, or antigen tests at home, I should say, that may be skewing the numbers a little bit. So if you do a home test and use an antigen test, and you do test positive, you probably should report it to the health department so that those numbers can be tabulated. And then finally, turning to some local news, proposal to make some changes to the Williams Dam in Londonderry has prompted a special meeting that will be held in Londonderry next week on Wednesday, April 20th, The Select Board will be holding an information meeting on the Williams Dam alternatives in preparation for a town meeting vote on whether or not to fund the removal of the dam. Like I said, that meeting will be held on April 20th at 6 p.m. at the Town Hall on Middletown Road in South Londonderry. An engineering study has found that the 140-year-old dam is in a weakened state and something should be done, whether to remove it or repair it, but leaving it as is probably not really an option. And again, you can watch a segment that we did about this, goes into a little more depth on this whole subject. It features an interview with Town Administrator Shane O'Keefe and Londonderry Select Board Chairman Tom Cavanaugh. And this issue will also be part of the discussion at Londonderry's town meeting, which will be held on Saturday, April 30th, 10 days after this meeting about the Williams Dam. That'll be starting at 9:30 in the morning, also being held at the old town hall there on Middletown Road. And that's going to be one of the items on the warning where folks will be asked what they would like to see happen. And the engineering report, I'm sure, will be gone into in some detail, and the various costs of the various options will also be discussed. GNAT-TV will be at both of those meetings in case you can't make it, and we'll have reports on both the special meeting on the 20th and the annual town meeting on April 30th. Well, that'll do it for us for today. I hope you have a great weekend. Happy Easter, happy Passover, and well, I'll see you again next week. For now, this is Andrew McKeever. I'll see you again next Friday, and again, have a great weekend. Take care.